Today, Devi and I want to speak on this subject of smile through your trials. It's not so much that we want to develop a kind of a false attitude, a Pollyanna outlook where everything is always perfect, we don't want to be false. We have to live our lives with deep integrity. And so sometimes we have trials, sometimes those trials are difficult. And just to deny that anything ever happens, that is not going to lead us to the kind of freedom that we want to develop in order to become really spiritually free. What we really need to control is the reactive process. That's why we did this inner fire ceremony, offering up the feelings of the heart. Masters talked about the heart center as being the place where the Chittva, or he defined it as primordial feeling nature, where our primordial feeling nature is centered. And in that heart chakra, those feelings from long time past, our feelings tend to take on a positive and a negative aspect. That's part of duality. Duality always divides things into polarities, night and day, light and dark, love and hate. In this case, positive and negative feelings. And so what we want to do is, because polarity itself is the mechanism by which this universe is held into existence, and also the polarity, especially of feelings, is how we are kept attached to this universe of duality. In Patanjali, he has a beautiful sutra. He says, Yogas Chitra Vritti Narod. Yoga is the neutralization of those vortices or whirlpools, eddies of Chittva, of primordial feelings. And so yoga, meaning union with God, occurs spontaneously as soon as those eddies of Chittva are released or are neutralized. And in fact, one could say that the primary purpose of the techniques of the spiritual path that we practice is to help us control the prana that creates these whirlpools, to interiorize that prana and to bring it up to the spiritual eye. When we concentrated on the light or the fire at the spiritual eye and offered up the feelings to that light, in a sense what we were really doing is we were bringing the prana into the heart center and neutralizing those eddies, those whirlpools of likes and dislikes. And then we were offering that prana up to the spiritual eye. And in the spiritual eye resides a number of things. It resides there, the doorway to freedom. Ultimately, the Hong Saw technique, the release of these various likes and dislikes, all of that creates an inner freedom. And that inner freedom will eventually allow us to exit from the body in deep meditation. The yogi goes breathless, and so he's no longer attached to the body. And as part of that non-attachment to the body, there ceases this reactive process that always is going on. See, the reactive process is not just our mental moods and as I was saying, likes and dislikes, but the positive and negative moods that we have. The reactive process goes all the way down to the breath. The inhalation is a positive flow, exhalation is a negative flow. There's an actual movement of prana in nerve channels in the subtle spine, the ida and the pingala. And so every time we inhale, there's a movement up in the ida. When we exhale, there's a movement down in the pingala. And that reactive process is always there as long as we're breathing. And so the breath itself, one could say, attaches us to the body and attaches us to the polarity and the positive and negative flow of prana. And in order to be completely free, we need to overcome that and be released, released from that reactive process. Now, as we learn to control that, see, I'm talking completely about meditation techniques. We did the Hong Saw technique, but many of you will also have learned and practiced Kriya. Kriya is the best technique available in the world at this time for the neutralization of this reactive process, because we're working directly with the prana itself. And we're learning gradually to take control over that prana and to move it under our control up and down the spine, and then ultimately to bring it to the point between the eyebrows. The point between the eyebrows, the kutastha, is very important. It's the exit door. It's the door from which that prana will become completely still, and then we will exit from the body. It is the place where we will be released from ego. The center of ego is in the medulla, and when the energy comes up to the medulla or is centered there, we feel more a sense of I-ness, or I own this, I have this, these are my rights, they can't do this to me. All those things that separate us, those attitudes, those feelings that separate us from other people, that's energy in the medulla. When we can take the energy there and bring it to the kutastha, then the energy of the ego is released. And one could say, in fact, Swami did say to us, Swamiji said to us one time, the whole of the spiritual path is overcoming the ego, or dissolving the ego. And so, by taking that energy from the medulla and bringing it to the kutastha, to the spiritual eye, we overcome the ego, we begin to dissolve the ego. The spiritual eye is also the center where the guru in us resides, our own higher consciousness, but that's represented by the image of the guru. So at any rate, I don't want to go into a long talk about the importance of the spiritual eye, but what I'm saying here is that when we can bring the reactive process under our control, and we can bring it from the heart to the spiritual eye, then we have the secret, not just for freedom in meditation, but also freedom from moods in daily living. And when we can control this reactive process, then everything that happens to us, the trials that happen to us, are just events. They aren't terrible things, they aren't good, they aren't bad, they're just events. One time we were with Swami Kriyananda, who obviously had practiced Kriya for many, many years and had gained control over his reactive process. One time we were with him driving in a car, and we were going on a little weekend of skiing up in the mountains in California. And as the car began to go up to higher and higher altitudes, it started to snow. And unbeknownst to Swamiji was driving, unbeknownst to him, the tires of the car were relatively bald. It was an old, quite an old car, and so the tires were old, and they didn't have much grip or tread on them. And the road became more and more slippery, and then we saw signs saying that all the cars had to stop and put on chains. And so Swamiji hit the brake to stop, and the car went into a complete spin. It spun around in the road at least a couple of times. And in fact, one of the ladies sitting in the back was shouting, "Swami, Swami!" And the car went spinning a couple of times, and then it crashed into the wheel of a big bus that was there. And it smashed in the front of the car. Didn't really hurt the bus, but the car was not operable. And after it had spun around, crashed into the side of this bus, Swami kind of calmly turned around to this hysterical lady in the back seat and said, "What?" And of course everybody began to calm down. So we called a tow truck, and the tow truck came. But in the meantime, Swamiji had walked around to the front of the bus, and he looked at the sign that said the destination, and he realized that the bus was going to the same resort, ski resort, that we wanted to go to in order to have this skiing weekend. So he said, "Oh, well, let's get our stuff out of the trunk, we'll just get on the bus." And so got the suitcases and the skis and got on the bus. And the passengers of the bus were looking at Swamiji, I mean, this is a rather strange occurrence anyway. And then they were kind of commiserating and were saying, "Oh, it's too bad your weekend is ruined and your car is totaled, and oh, what a shame, what a shame." And Swamiji said, "Look, I would feel fine about this in a week. Why waste a week? I'm going to go skiing." See, he had his reactive process, his chittwa, under control. And so it wasn't as if he denied that there was any problem. Of course there was a problem. But why let a problem, why let a little trial ruin a week's vacation or a weekend's vacation? Why be sad for a week? So, see, we too can control our reactive process. It starts with our spiritual practices. It starts with meditation. But then we also have to live the results of our meditation in our daily life. And so if you want to start controlling, if you want to control your reactive process, which we have kind of translated into the title of today's talk, which is How to Smile Through Life's Trials. If you want to be able to smile through life's trials, then start with little things. When you get up in the morning, and you're going to have some little trial that will give you a reactive element. So maybe your tea isn't quite the right temperature or quite the right sweetness, or the meal for breakfast is not exactly the way that you want it, and you have a negative reaction. Catch yourself at that point, because that's just a little bitty trial. Catch yourself at that point and say, "No, I'm not going to react to this." Master said the best attitude of all is to be even-minded and cheerful through everything. And so in the morning, tomorrow morning when you get up, start this process of catching yourself when you have a negative reaction. And when you have that negative reaction, say, "No, I'm going to be even-minded and cheerful. This little test here of breakfast, it just is what it is. I don't have to react to it. I'll be even-minded and cheerful." And try to extend that throughout the day to more and more of the little episodes that happen. And as you practice that, as you gain control over your moods in little things, then when bigger waves come along, then you will already have learned how to control your reactive process. And when you can do that, see, you don't want to just neutralize, you don't want to deaden, you don't want to pretend, and you don't want to suppress. You just want to neutralize those tendencies, and finally you want to produce a positive flow of energy. That's what makes you cheerful. See, it isn't just that you deaden the energy, because the energy, as long as you're breathing, as long as that breath is flowing, the energy is going to move up and down in these spinal channels, the Ira and the Pingala. As long as that is there, you're going to have a tendency to have a reactive nature. But if you can control it and produce the positive flow, the cheerful part of the even-minded and cheerful, produce the positive flow of that flow of prana in the spine, and to emphasize that, then that becomes very, very strong. And when it's strong, when it's under your control, then no matter what comes to you, you can find a way to smile through it. And we have had many, many tests at Ananda, and we have learned to smile through those tests. But it starts with our spiritual practices and our spiritual freedom. But these spiritual practices are not just impractical. When we learn to do these techniques properly, then we can do those techniques in the appropriate way in our daily lives, and it changes our life. Joy to you.
Namaste, my friends. I'll continue on now from what Jyotishji has been saying, and I'd like to share with you some attitudes that may help you to smile through your trials, or, as Master said, to be even-minded and cheerful under all circumstances. So, first of all, I think it's very important for each of us to view life impersonally, with detachment. Instead of thinking, oh, poor me, why is this happening to me? You just think, this is happening. When I was a teenager, I had two very good friends. In fact, we're still good friends to this day. Excuse me. And one of them was I think she had been a yogi in other lives. She was very detached and impersonal. And the other one was just a very nice person. And the very nice person was having to go through an operation that was a little bit painful. And we were visiting her in the hospital, and she was feeling sorry for herself, and oh, why is this happening to me? Why me? And my friend, I think, who had been a yogi, looked at her very, very impersonally, said, why not you? And this is not what the friend in the hospital wanted to hear, but it's the truth. Why not? Why shouldn't this be happening to you? And if you can just try to be an observer, even in your own life, when things are going well, don't jump up and down, oh great, this wonderful things happen. And this is again coming back to the reactive process. But just have that little edge of detachment. Try at all times. Swami Kriyanandaji would tell us that when he would go to the dentist for dental work, he wouldn't take anesthetic, Novocaine or whatever it was they were using, because he didn't like that dull, dead feeling that it produced. And so when he was in the dentist, one time he said he broke a tooth, and the dentist had to actually remove the root, the live nerve, not the root of the tooth, but the nerve from the tooth. And Swami said, well, the doctor explained what was going to happen. And Swami said, no, I don't want anesthetic. And the dentist said, are you sure this is going to be very painful? Swami said, no, I'll be all right. And Swami said the sweat was running down the dentist's forehead because he was so anxious that he was going to be causing him a lot of pain. But Swami said, I just removed myself from that situation as though looking down from afar, and just thought, well, this is happening now, the dentist is doing this. And Swami said, I went on to think, I've had a very fulfilling life. Many good things have happened to me, some bad things have happened to me, but I remained the same. And the dentist performed what he needed to do. And Swami said I really was not affected by it so much. So even in the midst of difficulties, try to realize this is happening. It doesn't need to be about you. It's just happening. I'm part of this larger drama. So this is a very important attitude to work with. Another one that I found very helpful is whatever comes, just to see that it's all from God's hands. There's a wonderful story from ancient India. There was a saintly sadhu wandering through the countryside, and first he came to a little village, and the people were kind to him, and they gave him some food and gave him a little shawl for warmth and so forth, and he was very grateful. And then he wandered out of the village and came to a little forest path, and there were brigands in there, and they grabbed him and they beat him and took away everything that the villagers had given him, and he was lying there just barely conscious. And some of his disciples were concerned because he didn't return to the little ashram hut, and they went out and found him with a gash on his forehead and everything taken from him. And they said, Master, Master, who did this to you? First they said, do you know who we are? Because they didn't know if he was conscious or not. And he said, yes, you are Divine Mother. Now you come to me as friends. A little while ago you came to me as the people that beat me and took my belongings. Before that you came to me as the kind villagers. It's only you, Lord. And if we can realize that everything that comes to us in our life is from God, for our own growth. Yoganandaji had a beautiful quote in which he said, a beautiful prayer, he said, dance of life or dance of death, know that these come from me, and as such rejoice. And so if we can go through life not only seeing that it's all from God, but being grateful for everything that happens, because it's all for us to expiate our karma. God has exquisitely designed every experience in our life for our enlightenment, for our moving through our karma, for us to gain knowledge. And most people miss the point. They miss the point that this is a lesson that's coming to me, for me to expand my awareness, for me to expand my understanding, for me to broaden my self-identity. And they say, oh, not this, not that, why me? And if you can just say, thank you, God. Thank you for the kind friend. Thank you for the critic. Thank you for the brigand that steals my few possessions from me. It's all you, God. And once, this is a little amusing story, but Jyotish was reading the beautiful book In the Vision of God by Swami Ramdas, and he had a similar story, how he had very few possessions, and a madman broke into the little cave he was staying and took everything away, and his followers came in and said, this is terrible, we're going to go and look for that madman. And Swami Ramdas said, what kind of fools are you? Ram came and he wanted my few little possessions, and I gave him, and you want to go and chase after Ram and take these things away? It's all Ram. And so Jyotish had just been reading this, and then we were visiting some friends in Italy, and Jyotish became ill, and he was just lying on his bed in the room we were staying, and I brought him a few little cookies from lunch in the dining area, and he had the cookies on a plate, and there was a little cat in the house, and the cat came, and first he ate all the cookies, and Jyotish got upset, and then he threw the cat out of the room, but then the cat found the way to get back in, and then the cat came, Jyotish was lying in bed, and the cat came and sat right on his forehead, and then Jyotish started laughing. and he remembered the story from Ram Dass, and he said, "Oh, Ram, you came and ate my cookies, and now you're trying to make me understand by blessing me on the spiritual eye that it's all you." So if we can have that attitude that it's just all from God, and don't push anything away, nothing away. And then finally, the attitude I want to talk about is happiness is really a choice. It's under our control. No matter what happens, if we decide, Master said, if I decide to be happy, nothing in the world can take that away from me. And he went on to say further, every test in life is a test of our willpower. So if we put out our willpower, no matter what happens, how hard it is, how good it is, I keep my inner joy, my inner peace. And we go through life with that attitude. Swami, many years ago, gave a series of lectures throughout America. He called them, the title of the seminars or lectures he was giving was The Practice of Joy. And he had a wonderful line from that. He said, joy is the solution, not the reward. So if we're waiting, and many people spend their whole life waiting for all the circumstances in their life to perfectly align themselves for their optimal happiness. My friends, we wait many, many lifetimes. But if we just say, whatever is right now, I choose to be happy. I had a friend who last year was diagnosed, 2 years ago, was diagnosed with a very advanced throat cancer, and they gave her but a few months to live. And she went through the medical treatments, but this woman practiced meditation, and she, after the surgery and the treatment, the doctors really didn't expect her to live, but she started recovering, and she began getting her strength back, and there was no sign of cancer. And now about 1.5 years has gone by, 2 years, and she's totally well, back to her normal life. And I asked her, I said, what did you do? Because I could tell you had an inner process going on. And she said, well, I wasn't in denial. I didn't disregard what the doctors said, and so I don't have cancer. So I wasn't in denial, but I didn't entirely accept it either, meaning I had that little bit of detachment. I didn't identify with the suffering I was going through. But she said, I just tried to be as positive as I could. And she sailed through it beautifully and is totally well today. And so this is just to choose to be happy under all circumstances. Swami also said, there is a joy appropriate to every circumstance in life. And that doesn't mean when things are going against us, when there's loss on any level, that we're just laughing and giggling. But to feel that inner joy, no matter what happens, God's presence, God's gift to us. This is really the most important lesson any of us can learn. Because in this world of Maya, in this world, as it says in the Gita, of Sukha Dukkha Dham, alternating states of pain and pleasure, where is lasting happiness? Where is true peace? It's not to be found in this world. But if we can, in our heart, say, I choose to be happy, this world is not my world. I wait to return to my inner kingdom of God's joy and peace and bliss. Then no matter what happens, the smile of God's sweetness is always with us. So we hope these thoughts are helpful to you. And we also want to mention to all of our friends in India that Jyotishji and I will be returning happily. We are looking forward to it in early September. We'll arrive in India around September 9th, and we'll be giving satsangs and sharing time with all of you for several months till the beginning of December. So we're so looking forward to it, and we won't be having virtual satsangs, but actual satsangs. So Guruji bless you all with lasting joy and inner peace.